Okay, today we will discuss human nervous system. Like other vertebrates, humans also have centralized nervous system, right? And the nervous system is consist of different coordination systems that include the central nervous system, CNS, and it is consist of two organs, the brain and spinal cord, right? Then there is peripheral nervous system, which is further divided into two nervous systems, that is somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is further divided into two parts, that is sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. We will discuss all these types of nervous system which are present in our body in detail in further lectures. Today we will discuss the brain in detail. So let's start. Central nervous system, CNS, which includes brain and spinal cord, right? Okay. Our brain and spinal cord is well protected. How? We have a bony covering or bony armor. Like on brain we have skull, and for spinal cord we have vertebral column. Vertebral column enclose our spinal cord for its safety, and we have very hard skull or brain case which protects our brain. Then there is another layer of protection, that is the three tough connective tissues cover, which is present around the spinal cord and brain as well. It is called as meninges, right? It is very important because it comes in your MCQs, right? So what are meninges? Meninges are the three tough connective tissues which forms covering around the spinal cord and your brain for protection. Then there is another means for protection of our brain and spinal cord, that is cerebrospinal fluid, CSF. Cerebrospinal fluid, it keeps baths the neurons of the central nervous system. The neurons present in central nervous system, they are kept bathed with cerebrospinal fluid. Now let's see the structure of our brain. Here you can see the different parts of the brain, right? This is cerebrum, hypothalamus, pons, medulla oblongata. This is cerebellum, right? Thalamus, this area thalamus. This is corpus callosum. And these parts are called as ventricles, right? To study the different parts of the brain, we need to categorize it, right, into different parts. First, I need to tell you a few things about the brain. In vertebrates and in humans also, the brain is developed, or primary brain vesicles are developed during the embryo stage, right? At very early stage, the brain or the central nervous system starts developing, right? And it develops from the nerve cord. And after different developmental stages, after passing through the different developmental stages, the primary brain vesicle, it divides into three irregular vesicles, or three, you can call it three different parts, right? And in this diagram, are different functions are given with the respective part of the brain. We will discuss it in the later slides. First, you have to know what are the parts of the brain. As I told you, the primary brain vesicle, it is divided into three irregular vesicles, which further develop or makes the mature brain. And these three irregular vesicles are forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain, right? Forebrain, which means the frontal part of the brain, midbrain, the middle part, and the hindbrain. Here in this slide, you can see this is the forebrain or the frontal part of the brain, right? Then this is the midbrain, which is present in middle part of the whole structure, right? And this, the cerebrum and medulla oblongata and pons, these three structures combinedly forms the hindbrain, right? Hind means behind or the last part of the brain. Now, the forebrain, it is divided into two parts, the telencephalon and diencephalon, right? The telencephalon, it is consists of cerebral hemispheres, because there are two in number, that's why I am calling it hemispheres, right? It is also called as cerebrums. These cerebrums, the major or the larger part of the brain, it is coordinated by corpus callosum. Again, very important terminology. Corpus callosum is responsible, it is a part of the brain which is responsible for coordination of the cerebrums or cerebral hemispheres. These are the largest part of the brain, and we will discuss its function in detail in further slides. Now, the diencephalon, it is divided into two parts, thalamus and limbic system. Limbic system consists of hypothalamus, amygdala, and hippocampus. Now, functions, we will discuss their function one by one according to the parts. Cerebrums or the cerebral hemispheres, they are responsible for coordination of different senses. Whenever we sense something or our body sense something, the sensory system, it brings the messages to the cerebrums, which process that messages, right? And make the coordination or the important response against this messages. Then our intelligence, the power of reasoning, and our memory. Reasoning, like when we think about something critically, why that is happen, or think about something like if someone tells you anything about anything about like a new thing, and your brain start thinking about it, like either the one who is telling you something, is it right or wrong, that reasoning, the plus and minus points about that thing. Then memory. Second part, the remember we are discussing the parts of the forebrain, right? The second part is thalamus. Thalamus is also called as clearing house for sensory impulses. Sensory impulses, again, your sense organs, whenever they generate the impulses or messages, they come to the thalamus, and here they are brought to the other part of the brain for processes, right? Then the happiness or pleasure we feel or the pain we feel, it is because of the thalamus. Then hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is very important part of the brain because it is responsible for a lot of activities of our body. Like it maintains our homeostasis. It is responsible for regulatory function of pituitary gland, which releases hormones, right? Then our body temperature. It maintains our body temperature. It regulates our blood pressure. Whenever we feel hunger or thirst, our anger, our happiness, pleasure, pain, all of these different activities that we perform or that we feel are processes right here in hypothalamus, right? Then the amygdala is responsible for pleasure and punishment, the sense of punishment and pleasure. Then hippocampus, again the part of forebrain. It is responsible for long-term memories like our childhood memories and these kind of memories. Now the midbrain. Our midbrain, it is smaller in size and it is responsible for processes of the sensory information. Again, our vision, we can see, and the images form on the images that are formed and that are processes because of the presence of the midbrain, right? Then odor, we can smell, we can sense the smell because of this part of the brain. Then the spinal cord. Basically, the midbrain is responsible to transport the messages from spinal cord to the forebrain. Then the hindbrain, or the last part of the brain. It has three parts, that is medulla oblongata, as I have shown you in the diagram, then cerebellum and pons. Don't get confused between cerebrums and cerebellum. Remember, the part of the forebrain is cerebrum, while the part of the hindbrain is cerebellum. Now I will go back to that diagram with the functions right here. Hindbrain, which have a medulla oblongata, this part, then cerebellum right here, and pons, the smaller part which is present here. They are basically responsible for, if we talk about the cerebellum, it is responsible for our balance, the position of our body, or that we can balance our body because of this part, plus the precise movement of our muscles, like our muscles contraction in a precise manner whenever we want to pick up something, or how we can write properly and very precisely. That is because of the cerebellum, right? Then there is one more important point about the cerebellum, that is it is greater in size in humans as compared to the other mammals. We have very much greater size of cerebellum as compared to the other mammals. That's why we can we can do very precisely our movements and the muscle contractions, right? Then there is another part which is called as medulla oblongata right here. This part is basically responsible for the reflex actions of our body. It is also called as reflex center, right? And it is responsible for our breathing. Our breathing is controlled by this part. Our heartbeat, our blood pressure, our coughing, swallowing, hiccuping, sneezing, even vomiting and digestion is also controlled by medulla oblongata, the hind brain, the part of hind brain, right? Then the last part of the brain that we will discuss here is pons. Pons is the part which is responsible for muscular coordination and the facial expressions that we give very, frequently and differently. I can remember Farheen here for giving facial expressions. So these facial expressions are generated just because of the part of the hindbrain, right? Again, our breathing is also controlled by this part, and our sleeping is controlled by this part of the brain, the hindbrain, right? Then there are another structure which is called as reticular formation, which is present between three different parts of the brain right here. This reticular formation is present in medulla oblongata, pons, and the midbrain, the part of the midbrain right here. This part is very important and it has very interesting function because it monitors the messages of the nervous system, and it also manages that what kind of messages from nervous system should get a reaction and which should be ignored. This part decides what kind of reaction should be generated in against the nervous system messages, and also how which type of messages should be ignored. And the example is whenever the small kids which are sleeping with the parents, when they cry, the mother will wake up very quickly on that cry, while the father will ignore this call and enjoy his sleep, right?